In the pale dawn light of May 1940, near the French town of Arras, British Matilda tanks advanced with an air of invincibility. Their thick armor shrugged off German anti-tank shells that ricocheted harmlessly into the fields. German infantry fell back in confusion, convinced they had no weapon that could stop the steel monsters. Then a column of Luftwaffe anti-aircraft guns was rushed forward, not to shoot at planes, but to level their barrels against the oncoming tanks. Crews swung the long barrels of the 8.8-centimeter Flak 18 down to earth, adjusted their sights, and fired. The result was devastating. The first shot pierced straight through the armor of a Matilda, sending it up in flames. More guns joined in. What had been designed as a weapon to reach bombers high in the sky suddenly proved itself just as deadly against armor. Within minutes, the British counterattack crumbled under the thunderous blast of the 88. German officers would later recall the stunned silence that fell after the first Matilda erupted, broken only by the steady rhythm of the crews reloading and firing again. Word spread quickly through the ranks. There was now a gun that could kill anything the Allies put on the battlefield. Soldiers began to whisper its caliber like a curse. The Act, the 88. What began as an improvisation at Arras would soon become a deliberate tactic. Across North Africa, in the deserts where Rommel fought, the long-barreled 88s would rise out of concealed pits to cut down advancing British armor at ranges no other gun could match. Later, mounted inside the turrets of Tiger tanks, the weapon would transform from a defensive stopgap into the spearhead of armored assaults. From that first day at Arras, the Allied armies learned a hard truth. The German 88 was never just a gun. It was a hunter, and it would haunt them wherever the war carried them. By the summer of 1940, the German army had swept across Western Europe with astonishing speed. Yet, as the Blitzkrieg advanced, cracks in the Wehrmacht's arsenal were already becoming apparent. The light anti-tank weapons that had accompanied German infantry, the 3.7 centimeters Pak 36 and later the 5 centimeters Pak 38, were increasingly inadequate against the new generation of Allied armor. British Matildas, French Char B1S, and later Soviet T-34s could shrug off hits from these small caliber guns with little more than superficial damage. German soldiers grimly nicknamed the 3.7 centimeters Pak 36 the Hirschenklopfdraht, the Army's door knocker, because firing it at a modern tank was like knocking politely on its armor. The German High Command faced a dilemma. Their armored doctrine relied heavily on fast-moving panzers supported by infantry, but those units were vulnerable when enemy tanks appeared in strength. A gap in anti-tank capability threatened to blunt the Blitzkrieg. What the Wehrmacht needed was a weapon with enough velocity and penetrating power to destroy even the heaviest enemy tanks at long range. Ironically, the solution already existed, but in another branch of the armed forces. The Luftwaffe had fielded the 8.8 centimeters Flak 18 in the early 1930s as a high-altitude anti-aircraft gun. Designed by Krupp, the weapon combined a long barrel with powerful propellant charges, giving its shells tremendous speed. For bringing down bombers at altitudes above 20,000 feet, that velocity was essential. No one had initially considered that the same qualities, flat trajectory, high muzzle velocity, and armor-piercing ammunition, made it ideal for killing tanks. The turning point came not only at Arras, but throughout the campaigns of 1940 to 41, when German commanders realized the Flak's potential. Rommel, in particular, became a champion of the weapon in North Africa. Facing British armor with thicker and thicker protection, he ordered Flak 18 and later Flak 36 batteries to be concealed in defensive lines. When British tanks advanced, the gunners would lower the barrels and open fire, often knocking out armor before it could even bring its own guns to bear. The Allies were stunned. The Matilda II, with frontal armor up to 78 millimeters thick, had been considered nearly invulnerable to most German weapons. Yet reports from the desert spoke of these tanks being penetrated from over 1,500 meters away. A weapon originally intended to clear the skies was now dictating the outcome of battles on the ground. Production soon ramped up. Between 1939 and 1945, more than 20,000 88mm guns of various models were built. Each one cost the German state roughly 20,000 Reichsmarks. Expensive compared to lighter anti-tank weapons, but justified by the results. Some were deployed purely in anti-aircraft units. Others were diverted to field artillery and anti-tank roles. Strategic necessity blurred the lines. Other nations took note. Spain and Finland, aligned with Germany, received shipments of 88mm guns. Reports circulated through Allied intelligence, warning commanders that 88mm positions must be treated as priority targets. Even before the weapon became synonymous with the Tiger tank, it was shaping Allied strategy. Commanders now had to factor in the risk that any open advance might run into an 88 waiting patiently beyond the horizon. Politically, the weapon also symbolized Germany's ability to innovate under pressure. While the Allies had the advantage in numbers, the Wehrmacht compensated with adaptability, turning a defensive anti-aircraft gun into an offensive tank killer embodied that philosophy. It was not just about filling a gap in equipment. It was about rewriting the rules of the battlefield. For the German soldier crouching beside one of these long, sleek barrels, the 88mm offered reassurance that no enemy tank was beyond their reach. For Allied crews, it planted a seed of fear, an awareness that somewhere, perhaps unseen, a single gun could reach out across the battlefield and end their advance in a flash of fire and steel. The 8.8cm gun was born from Germany's interwar quest for a versatile, high-velocity anti-aircraft weapon. In the early 1930s, Krupp engineers produced the Flak 18, a sleek, long-barreled cannon mounted on a cruciform carriage that allowed rapid traverse and elevation. Designed to fire 9-kilogram shells at more than 800 meters per second, it could reach bombers flying above 20,000 feet. For its intended role, it was formidable, but the weapon's potential lay beyond the skies. By 1936, combat experience in the Spanish Civil War hinted at new possibilities. German advisors observed that the Flak 18 could penetrate armored vehicles when used in a ground role. Subsequent refinements produced the Flak 36 and Flak 37, which introduced easier transport with detachable barrel sections and improved fire control systems. The gun's versatility made it one of the most sought-after pieces in the Wehrmacht arsenal. The technical specifications set the 88 apart. Its 56 caliber barrel length gave shells extraordinary velocity and flat trajectory. In its anti-tank configuration, the gun could hurl an armor-piercing round at up to 1,000 meters per second, punching through more than 100 millimeters of armor at 1,500 meters. Later versions, like the KWK 43 mounted on the Tiger II, reached even higher muzzle velocities, capable of defeating any Allied tank of the war, including the Soviet IS-2 and American Pershing. There were trade-offs. At nearly 5 tons in its anti-aircraft carriage, the gun was not easily maneuvered in the field. Setting up required preparation and often left crews exposed. It was also costly, roughly 20,000 Reichsmarks per piece, compared to about 12,000 for a 75mm PaK-40. Yet the results spoke for themselves. No other weapon in German service combined such range, velocity, and destructive power. By 1942, the 88 had moved beyond its dual role. Mounted inside the turret of the Panzerkampfwagen 6, better known as the Tiger I, it became the KWK 36, the most feared tank gun of its time. Later, the Tiger II carried the KWK 43, a longer-barreled version that elevated the gun's capabilities to unprecedented levels. These tanks dominated battlefields from the Eastern Front to Normandy, able to knock out enemy armor before it could reply. For comparison, the PaK 40-75mm anti-tank gun was Germany's workhorse, with more than 20,000 produced. It was easier to move, cheaper, and deadly at medium ranges. But against heavy armor, Churchills, IS-2s, or even upgraded Shermans, it lacked the penetrating edge. The 88 filled that void, serving as the Wehrmacht's ultimate answer to everything gun. The psychological effect was just as significant as the technical. Allied crews described the dread of being under fire from the 88, a weapon whose crack and impact could be recognized instantly. To face it was to know that distance and armor offered little protection. At what range do you think the German 88mm gun could reliably destroy a heavily armored Allied tank? Under 1,000 meters, around 1,500 meters, or beyond 2,000 meters? We'll reveal the answer before the end of this video. The reputation of the German 88mm gun was not forged in workshops or test ranges, but in the smoke and dust of real battle. Its first decisive appearance came during the Battle of Arras in May 1940. British forces launched a counterattack against advancing German units, spearheaded by Matilda II tanks. These machines, with nearly 80 millimeters of frontal armor, were considered invulnerable to the standard German anti-tank weapons of the time. As the Matildas rolled forward, the smaller 37 millimeters and 50 millimeters guns bounced rounds harmlessly off their hulls. Panic spread among German infantry. Then, from hastily repositioned Luftwaffe batteries, the 88s were brought into line. Lowered from their anti-aircraft elevation, they spat armor-piercing rounds across the fields. Within minutes, Matildas that had seemed unstoppable were burning wrecks. The Allies had unknowingly stumbled into a weapon that would stalk them for the rest of the war. In North Africa, the 88's legend grew. General Erwin Rommel recognized the gun's potential and integrated it into his defensive tactics. He ordered his crews to dig the weapons into the sand, masking their long barrels until the moment of ambush. When British armor advanced across the open desert, the hidden 88s opened fire at ranges over 1,500 meters. British tank crews, who had previously trusted in the resilience of their Matildas and later Churchills, found themselves destroyed before their own guns could reach the German lines. Allied reports noted with dread that the 88 could engage from distances that rendered conventional counterattacks suicidal. By 1942, the 88mm had become a standard feature of German defensive positions. In the Soviet Union, it was employed during Operation Barbarossa against T-34s and KV-1s. The Soviet tanks, with their sloped armor and thicker protection, initially outclassed German panzers. But once again, the 88 restored the balance, deployed as both a static defense and as mobile support with mechanized units. It proved capable of knocking out the heaviest Soviet armor. Soldiers at the front recalled the sharp crack of the gun, followed by the piercing shriek of its shell, and the sudden eruption of flame from an enemy tank struck squarely at long range. The gun's deployment reached a new dimension with its adaptation into German tanks themselves. The Tiger I, first committed to combat near Leningrad in late 1942, carried the KVK-36, a variant of the 88mm designed for turret mounting. Its arrival stunned Soviet forces. No longer did German troops need to dig in and wait. Their armored spearheads now carried the dreaded 88 with them. Accounts from the Eastern Front describe entire Soviet armored formations stalling once they realized Tigers were present. Even from over a mile away, the 88 could kill a T-34 with a single well-aimed shot. In Normandy, 1944, the gun's destructive capacity was again on display. British and American tank crews encountered both towed 88s in defensive hedgerow positions and Tiger tanks armed with the weapon. At Cannes, advancing Shermans were torn apart by concealed 88s before they could close the distance. Survivors spoke of the psychological terror, the certainty that any open ground could be swept by unseen guns with pinpoint accuracy. The numbers tell the story as much as the memories. A well-trained 88 crew could fire 15 to 20 rounds per minute. Its penetration capability exceeded 100 millimeters of armor at 1,500 meters, far beyond the reach of most Allied guns at the time. Allied tank crews often realized too late that their only chance against the 88 was to outnumber it, to overwhelm it with artillery, or to avoid it altogether. By the time the Tiger II arrived, mounting the KWK-43, an even longer-barreled version of the 88. The weapon's reputation was firmly cemented. Its presence in battle meant one thing: destruction at range. Whether dug into the desert sand, concealed in a French hedgerow, or mounted in the turret of a Tiger, the 88mm gun had established itself as one of the most feared weapons of World War II. By 1943, the 88mm was no longer a battlefield improvisation, but a cornerstone of German defensive and offensive strategy. Its presence altered how battles unfolded, forcing the Allies to adjust tactics and redesign their weapons. Nowhere was its strategic influence more apparent than in the great armored clashes of the Eastern Front. During the Third Battle of Kharkov in February, March 1943, Tiger I units equipped with the 88mm KWK 36 cut swayed through Soviet formations. Reports described T-34s and KV-1s bursting into flames from distances well beyond the reach of their own 76.2mm guns. German panzer commanders learned to position Tigers on ridgelines, using the long range of the 88 to dominate open ground. For the Soviets, whose armored thrusts relied on speed and mass, the realization that a single Tiger platoon could hold back an entire brigade was sobering. On the Western Front, the Allies met the same lesson in Normandy, 1944. The Bocage countryside provided countless ambush positions for towed 88s. Concealed behind hedgerows, they opened fire on advancing Shermans with lethal precision. At Villers-Bocage, the famous ambush by Michael Wittmann's Tiger, I showcased the weapon's devastating effect when combined with an aggressive commander. In a matter of minutes, Wittmann's 88mm gun destroyed more than a dozen Allied tanks and vehicles, shocking British units and cementing the Tiger's fearsome reputation. The Battle of the Bulge later that year underscored the escalation. The Tiger II, or King Tiger, carried the 88mm KWK-43 with a barrel length of 71 calibers and muzzle velocity exceeding 1,000 meters per second. It could penetrate nearly 200 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters. No Allied tank was safe. Sherman crews reported feeling helpless when confronted by a King Tiger positioned at long range. Even the upgunned Sherman Firefly, mounting the British 17-pounder, had to maneuver carefully, often seeking side or rear shots while avoiding the frontal arc of the 88. The strategic impact extended beyond the battlefield. Allied intelligence flagged 88mm positions as high-priority targets, and air forces were instructed to suppress them whenever possible. Artillery barges were planned specifically to neutralize suspected 88 sites before infantry advances. The mere possibility of encountering an 88-shaped operational planning. Commanders warned their troops that if you see a long barrel in the distance, assume it's an 88. Enemy responses came in two forms: technological and tactical. Technologically, the Soviets fielded the T-34-85 and the IS-2 heavy tank, designed with thicker frontal armor to resist the 88's fire. The Americans introduced the M-26 Pershing late in the war, with greater protection than the Sherman. The British countered with the Firefly, its powerful 17-pounder capable of defeating a Tiger if properly positioned. Yet despite these upgrades, no Allied crew ever underestimated the threat of the 88. Tactically, the Allies sought to minimize exposure. Infantry learned to advance cautiously, supported by smoke screens and artillery. Tank units employed flanking maneuvers, trying to outnumber and overwhelm German guns. Air power, increasingly dominant by 1944, became the most effective answer. Fighter bombers like the P-47 Thunderbolt were tasked with hunting down 88 emplacements. Still, none of these measures erased the psychological weight of the weapon. From the German perspective, the 88 was more than a gun. It was a force multiplier. A handful of well-positioned pieces could compensate for inferior numbers, blunting offensives and buying precious time. Veterans later recalled the confidence that came from serving behind the long barrel. One German gunner on the Eastern Front wrote, "When the 88 spoke, the battlefield fell silent. The Russians stopped moving forward. For the Allies, the response was often resignation. A Sherman commander in Normandy remarked, "You don't fight the 88. You survive it, or you don't." That stark reality defined countless encounters across both fronts. By the final years of the war, the 88 had influenced not only tactics, but also the trajectory of armor development itself. Its dominance demanded stronger armor, better guns, and new doctrines. It forced the Allies to adapt under fire, and in doing so, it ensured its place as one of the most strategically impactful weapons of World War II. The German 88mm gun's battlefield story did not end with the collapse of the Third Reich. Its legacy was already written in the memories of Allied tank crews who had faced it, in the pages of military reports that urged commanders never to underestimate its reach. For the German soldier, the 88 had been a trusted weapon that could bring down any foe. For the Allies, it was a menace that seemed to defy distance and armor. Now, to answer the question posed earlier, at what range could the German 88mm reliably destroy a heavily armored Allied tank? Under 1,000 meters, around 1,500 meters, or beyond 2,000 meters? The answer is the last. In its later forms, especially the KWK-43 mounted on the Tiger II, the 88 could kill from more than 2,000 meters. This extraordinary reach meant that Allied tanks often entered battle already at a disadvantage, unable to reply effectively until they closed the gap, if they survived long enough to get that close. By 1945, the weapon's production had exceeded 20,000 units across all models. Many were lost in the ruins of Germany, but significant numbers were captured intact. Some were reused by Allied nations immediately after the war. Spain retained the 88 in its arsenal for years, while other countries employed captured guns for training or study. Its design principles informed the development of post-war tank and anti-tank weapons, emphasizing the importance of high-velocity guns capable of long-range armor penetration. In terms of evaluation, historians distinguish between the tactical and strategic impact. Tactically, the 88 was unrivaled. A handful of guns could halt armored assaults, inflict devastating losses, and impose a psychological barrier as real as any physical one. Strategically, however, the picture is more complex. The weapon was expensive, heavy, and sometimes too cumbersome to deploy in the fast-moving maneuvers that Germany relied on early in the war. The reliance on such a weapon also reflected Germany's broader struggle to match Allied mass production. The 88 delivered quality and lethality, but could not compensate for the overwhelming quantity of tanks and aircraft fielded by the Allies. Still, in the realm of armored warfare, its influence was undeniable. The post-war Soviet T-54, American M48 patent, and German Leopard 1 all-mounted guns of 90mm or greater, inspired in part by the precedent the 88 had set. The idea that a tank's main gun should dominate battlefields at ranges beyond 1,500 meters came directly from the experience of facing the dreaded German cannon. Even beyond its technical legacy, the 88 became a symbol of World War II itself. For veterans, the memory of its blast, its uncanny accuracy, and its ability to strike from unseen positions remained vivid long after the war ended. To face the 88 was to know fear. To fire it was to hold, for a moment, the balance of power in one's hands. The German 88mm gun occupies a unique place in the memory of the Second World War. To Allied soldiers, it was the unseen predator that could kill from beyond the horizon. To German gunners, it was a lifeline, a weapon that promised parity even when outnumbered. Over time, its significance transcended the battlefield and entered the realm of myth. Veterans on both sides recalled the moment they first heard its sharp crack, followed by the piercing scream of a shell. Many never forgot the terror of realizing that distance and armor no longer offered safety. The weapon's symbolic depth lay in its versatility. Few pieces of equipment in the war served so many roles: anti-aircraft, anti-tank, and field artillery. It was a chameleon of destruction, reminding opponents that German engineering could adapt and innovate even under the pressures of total war. For the German public, the 88 became a point of pride, an icon of national resilience. Photographs of Tigers with their long 88mm barrels became propaganda images meant to reassure a population battered by Allied bombing campaigns. In popular culture, the dreaded 88 lived on long after 1945. War memoirs from British, American, and Soviet veterans often mention the weapon by name, treating it almost as a character in their stories. Films and documentaries highlighted the lethal accuracy of its fire, while video games and novels later reimagined its thunderous presence. Museums across Europe and North America display preserved 88s, often positioned alongside shattered tanks to illustrate their destructive legacy. Visitors stand before these long-barreled guns and see not just steel, but the embodiment of fear and awe that once defined the battlefield. Its influence also reached into military doctrine. After the war, tank design shifted decisively toward heavy, high-velocity guns. The Soviet Union's T-54, equipped with a 100mm main gun, was conceived in direct response to lessons learned against the 88. The United States followed with the M48 Patton, armed with a 90mm weapon, while Britain developed the Centurion with a 17-pounder and later a 20-pounder gun. Each reflected a recognition that armored warfare had become a contest of range, velocity, and penetration, concepts proven decisively by the German cannon. In NATO and Warsaw Pact doctrines of the Cold War, the shadow of the 88 lingered. Training manuals emphasized the importance of long-range gunnery and the necessity of destroying enemy armor before it could close the distance. The principle of combining thick armor with powerful guns, embodied by the Tiger and its 88mm, informed the design lineage that led to the modern Leopard 2 and M1 Abrams, both mounting 120mm smoothbore cannons. Yet the symbolic resonance of the 88 was not limited to military professionals. It became part of collective memory, a shorthand for German ingenuity and the terror of mechanized war. In memorials and ceremonies, its silhouette stood as a reminder of both technological achievement and human cost. For Allied survivors, it was a symbol of the battles they endured and the comrades they lost. For Germans, it became a relic of a time when weapons seemed to offer hope in a war that was already slipping away. Today, in museums and on preserved battlefields, the 88mm gun rests silent. Its long barrel points skyward or across quiet fields where no tanks will ever advance again. Visitors pause before it, some out of curiosity, others out of reverence. The steel is cold, the breach forever closed, but its presence speaks volumes. It reminds us that technology can inspire awe and fear in equal measure, that innovation can change the fate of armies, and that behind every legendary weapon are the soldiers who fired it and the lives it took. In the end, the 88 was more than a gun. It was a symbol of the brutal contest between firepower and survival, a reminder of how a single weapon could shape both the tactics of war and the memories of those who fought it. Its echo still lingers, not in the roar of battle, but in the silence of remembrance.